New York was falling asleep to the steady hum of air conditioners, and Mark Donovan's office glowed like a beacon in the stained-glass sky of Fifth Avenue. He walked in with a steady step, touched the smooth edge of the walnut desk, and for a moment the world seemed as controlled as his stock chart. And then the secretary, pale as a page of a legal report, placed an envelope on the desk with the seal of the federal prosecutor's office. All the layers of his life, the signatures, the seals, the investor presentations, suddenly shifted like a plate. Inside was a short document with long implications. The launch of an investigation into money laundering, tax evasion, conspiracy to defraud. Every word sank in like a thorn. "Are you okay, Mr. Donovan?" she whispered. "Get me a line to Richard," he said, his voice raspy as if someone had poured concrete dust down his throat. Richard Hayes, a friend on the neighborhood construction crews, a partner in the First Bridge loans, a brother he trusted more than himself. The line clicked. "Rich, I've got he gasped, "an investigation. Do you know anything?" A pause longer than a career. Then, a steely tone. "Maybe it's time to break old habits, Mark. Everyone pays for silence sooner or later." "For what silence?" he blurted out. "You're smart, you'll guess." Beeps. Silence fell over the penthouse that evening. Mark stared out the black glass where Manhattan rained down and saw two versions of himself, the emperor of the squares and the spectator of his own catastrophe. He uncorked the wine without touching the glass. On the kitchen counter lay an old Rolex engraved with 2009. "We survived," a gift from Richard after the crisis. He placed the watch in his palm, heavy, like a memory of a compromise that had once seemed pragmatic. The phone flashed. A message from an anonymous number. "Orpheus remembers. P.S." He reread it twice. "Orpheus? Postscriptum? Or price of silence?" The price of silence. He threw the empty glass at the wall. The glass chimed through the night. The shards littered the brown parquet. And for the first time in years, Mark felt not power but fear. The fear of honestly naming the value of something he had been buying for a long time. Peace. And the act ended on a high, cutting note. He left his palm on the cold window pane and whispered into the darkness. "If this is war, I'm not sure I want to win." The world turned on him in the morning. The CNBC tickers licked his name like fire on dry grass. Reporters crowded downstairs. Investors called not with questions, but with ultimatums. By lunchtime, men in Navy suits with impeccable IDs had entered the office. Boxes for shipping laptops had grown on the CFO's desk. Someone on Slack had leaked the liquidity stress tests to reporters. His lawyer, Liam Marsh, spoke technically and cautiously. "Grand jury, warrants possible. Communication must be reduced." Her tone was reminiscent of the sterility of an operating room, where surgeons know that amputations are inevitable. That same day, a story appeared in a well-known business publication. Orpheus LLC, schemes through Delaware, carousel of contracts, anonymous trusts in the Virgin Islands. The text italicized the abbreviation PS, which the source called price of silence, a fund from which settlements had been paid for years, to neighbors of a destroyed warehouse in New Jersey, to the family of a boy killed in a scaffolding collapse in Brooklyn, to an inspector whose signature appeared where no one had checked. His name stood next to Orpheus, as if it were a double crime. "Maybe Hayes is cooperating with the investigation," the author hinted. "Tell me what the reason is," Mark said, staring at Lou. "I can tell you that this is not the whole picture, but it will be enough to get you fired." "It's time to step aside," she said without blinking, "and prepare for the worst." The board of directors met at night. They talked about brand, market trust, succession planning. When the vote was over, Mark stood up like a boxer taking off his gloves. His portrait in the hall was swept off the wall almost gently, and that gentleness was the most brutal part of the ritual. At home, he encountered the blank stare of his daughter, Emily, an architecture student. "Dad, tell me it wasn't you. Tell me it was Hayes." He swallowed. "I allowed too much, and I didn't look down in time." "The boy in Brooklyn, was that allowed, too, Dad?" Her voice cracked. "You taught me that height is responsibility." When the door closed behind her, the silence was heavier than concrete. He held the phone, but there was no point in dialing Richard. He had already been seen at the prosecutor's office. He would go there with a lawyer and a smile carved out of stone. The media called him a source close to the case. Mark understood. The galaxy of his business was not what it seemed. Friends were orbits that quickly found a new center of gravity. And when another anonymous text came at night, Orpheus sings only to those who listen. Go back to 2009. He felt himself sinking lower, under the asphalt, into a layer of documents, letters, checks. There is a bottom in broken trust, and he hit it so hard that he lost his breath. He drove to Brooklyn at dawn, like a criminal returning to the scene of a crime. The building where the scaffolding had once fallen had risen with a new facade, smooth, modern, clean lines. The corner coffee shop smelled of cinnamon. He stood across from it until a woman with black hair tied in a bun approached him. "You were looking for me, Mr. Donovan," she said, and there was no fear in her voice. Rosa Alvarez, the boy's mother. He felt a burning sensation of shame. "I have no excuses. I came not to apologize because I don't know if I have the right. I came to hear everything you have to say." "Then sit down," she nodded to the bench. "My husband was a foreman on that site. He was forced to install cheap steel a week before the tragedy. He would bring home papers, copies of invoices, letters from contractors. He would say, 'This is going to kill us.' I thought it was fear. And then he died of a heart attack a year later. I kept the box, for the day someone would listen." She handed him an old cardboard box. Inside were invoices with the Orpheus LLC logo, correspondence with offices in Delaware, signatures of people who had been paid for settlements. In the corner of several documents, "P.S." was written in red pen. Mark read it, and each letter broke a bone in his memory. He knew the handwriting. He had seen similar digital impressions in his archives. "P.S." did not stand for postscriptum. What had once seemed pragmatic now looked like a bloody stamp, price of silence. "I thought I was saving hundreds of jobs, investors, pension funds," he whispered. "I thought it was honorable to weather the storm. And then the storm became the climate." "My son liked to draw bridges," Rosa said. "You build cities. But there is no bridge between truth and peace. You are either there or there." As he was leaving, a young woman with a tape recorder stopped him. "Elena Pack, journalist. 2 years ago, you won a lawsuit against me when I wrote about Orpheus's contracts. Now I have information that Hayes is only leaking to the investigation what will get him off. I have my own box. And the question is, do you want to tell the whole story, including the one that will cut you? Because only then will it be the truth." He looked at the box in his hand, at the tape recorder in her hand, at the light streaming through the clouds. "Write it down," he said. "I'll open the safe. I have the discs from 2009, correspondence with the inspector, with Richard, with the bankers. There is my voice, where I weigh the cost of silence. And your recording will be the first nail in the lid of this coffin." They sat in his empty office until nightfall, among boxes and folded plans. Archives flashed on the screen. 2009_crisis_settlement. Orpheus terms_final. Pisser for matrix. XLSX. The great discovery did not change the universe. It changed gravity. Everything that Mark considered the center shifted. The orbit of truth pulled him along with it. And at the end of the act, he held the flash drive, like a knife with a handle made of truth. A blow to himself, and the system finally became possible. The federal courthouse press room was buzzing like a beehive. The cameras were flashing white eyes. Elena stood nearby, like a witness choosing the light over hiding. Leah Marsh squeezed his shoulder. "This is suicide from a strategic point of view, but perhaps the only salvation from a conscience point of view. We have been selling this steel hope for so many years," he replied. "Time to buy the truth while it is still sold in the language of facts." They left. He began without a speech, simply with the facts. "In 2009, I signed the settlement protocols that became a scheme. We called it Orpheus because it calmed hell. We paid for silence. I am responsible. Richard Hayes is a co-organizer. I will cooperate with the investigation. And I ask that you create a restitution fund for the victims. I will sell some of the assets. Please direct these funds there." The questions rained down like hail. "Why now?" "Because my daughter asked me not as a manager, but as a father." "Do you plead guilty?" "Yes, in the part where silence was my choice." "Are you betraying your partner?" "I'm betraying our common crime." That night, he met Richard on the roof of a hotel overlooking the Hudson. The wind tore the words like paper. Richard smiled evenly. "You've always played the long game, Mark. Why did you go all in now?" Because I don't want to live on the credit of silence anymore. Do you think the truth will save you? It will eat you up. The court, the foundation, the charities are just new facades. I'm staying in the game. The market loves people who are clean on paper. The market loves comeback stories, Mark said. But I'm not the hero in this story. I'm just the one who finally stopped the music. It's not too late to change the track. Richard leaned closer. Destroy the flash drive. Tell me it's all just journalistic fabrications. I have lawyers, I have time. And you? You have sentiments and a girl who no longer looks you in the eye. Mark took out his phone. On the screen was a draft letter to the prosecutor's office, additional materials to the case, including the PS_Matrix magazines. His finger hovered. He felt the weight of each loss that would come, the concrete of the future without him. Years, empty mornings, and yet, a strange calm, like dawn after a fire. All or nothing, he whispered to himself in English and pressed send. The wind carried a short fool from the darkness, and Richard disappeared through the door. The climax had no fanfare. It had a silence, not bought, but earned through pain. The courtroom smelled of paper, coffee, and human fatigue. He pleaded guilty to 2 episodes. He fought for the rest, not for himself, so that the system would see guilt as a network, not a mask. He was given a term that was not physically devastating, but long enough for him to face himself every day without titles. The newspapers wrote, "The fall of a titan." But in cell number 14, he didn't fall. He simply learned to stand without the support of statistics. He wrote letters to Rosie about the fund that had been replenished by the sales of his estates, to Emily about bridges and responsibility, to Eleni about journalism that didn't stop at half the truth. When the first check arrived for the families of the victims, he wasn't thinking about atonement, about the fairness of the calculation. Years of silence are paid for with years of voices. He wrote plans for affordable housing for veterans and single mothers, without fake tinders, drew with a pencil, like his daughter had done when she was a child, cleanly, with corrections, without haste. Every now and then he heard one of his old buildings being demolished. The hum of concrete crushers vibrated in his chest, as if his heart was remembering a different rhythm. When he came out, the sky over the city was the same, only lighter. Emily greeted him without pathos, with coffee in a paper cup. "I can't go back to that house," he said. "And you don't have to," she replied. "Come to the construction site in the Bronx. I want you to see how we build without your old PS. Only with blueprints and a conscience." They walked along the site among the fresh beams. The young engineers argued over standards, not budgets for silence. Rosa stood by the hot chocolate van for the workers and nodded to him without ceremony, like a person doing her share of the work. Elena held a notebook, but she didn't write it down. Sometimes stories don't need words. In the evening, Mark was left alone on the roof of the new building. The city was breathing evenly. He placed an old Rolex next to him, now a trophy not of victory, but of memory, and spoke into the darkness. Can you be rich and honest? You can be honest and not rich, and that's probably the best start. What's more important, truth or success? Success without truth is just a good prop. Can you redeem the past? Only to the extent that you're willing to live without discounts in the future. There were no stars above him. The city covered them. But he could feel them, like a heartbeat without a stethoscope. There, on the other side of the noise, there was order. His finale had no fireworks. He had a work lamp and a blank sheet of paper. The open ending was like an unfilled pit. Come back tomorrow and work. And when the wind turned the page, he didn't stop it. He let it lie further, into a new chapter where silence costs nothing, because there's no need to buy anything more.